Summer Games Fest is right around the corner, June 7th, Josh Brown.
Very close, Scott Telford. And
Only
I'm
a few
looking
weeks.
forward to it, yeah.
Yeah, so why not run down all the rumors, leaks, etc. Some predictions in there as well, various games that might show up at the showcase. We also did some videos on things that might be at the PlayStation showcase, things that'll be at the Xbox showcase, so please go check that out as well. Tons of leaks and rumors, and so far, no crossover. This is all third-party things, not coming from the console manufacturers, various franchises that aren't owned by those. So it's worth distinguishing them, and like I said, go check out those other videos. The first thing is from you on Dragon Age 4.
Yes, Scott, we're going to start with Dragon Age 4 because technically this one has already been announced. We've seen a little trailer from it a few years ago, but it's been kind of radio silent on BioWare and EA's side for a long, long time. But the recent leaks and rumors, especially one from known insider Jeff Grubb, says that BioWare is apparently confident that this game will release towards the end of this year and is apparently shaping up well when it comes to those internal milestones. What I say to that, Scott, is it better be, because it feels like we've been waiting on this game forever, and we've had a lot of information over the years. We were literal children when we reported on the leak that this was initially conceived as Anthem with Dragons. It was also going down the live service approach. That is apparently a very old build. They have pivoted in a big way since then, and it's going to be more of a classical RPG. But the tumultuous development of this game has been crazy to witness. So many creative directors coming and going, so many different people jumping on board, then jumping off, and such little in the way of new news that I hope this knocks it out the park with a proper big reveal, or I guess a re-reveal in a few weeks' time. But I think it could go either way, to be honest, not to put a downer on things.
I'll throw something worse. Anthem was 5 years ago. That was 2019, and that was the apex of the EA inning of BioWare, just that idea of corporate goal chasing and not letting a studio stick to their guns. We've not really seen them be able to do anything close to what put them on the map in the first place. The best thing that I guess BioWare's name was associated with was the Mass Effect Legendary Edition, like the re-release of the trilogy across the last few years. But when it comes to Dragon Age, that feels like it's from a different era of BioWare altogether. It's been a decade since Dragon Age Inquisition, which is even more painful. I just hope that they can come out and reveal something, show some gameplay that feels like they actually wanted to make it. The entire reveal of Anthem, the entire run-up to that game's launch, didn't feel like anybody on the team actually wanted to do it. And then once we got all the insider stories from the likes of Jason Schreier and Kotaku, that was very much the case. They were struggling to put different tech demos together to appease different people from inside EA. And I just hope that hasn't been the case for Dragon Age. I hope that as that game rolled out, EA weren't over their shoulder just saying, well, have you got something for microtransactions? Have you got some sort of live service component? Have you got something in there that we can over monetize and this actually gets to be a Dragon Age game?
It would always be frustrating if this game released and it was stuffed with microtransactions, if it was a compromised vision and it was trying to appeal to everyone and didn't really have any interest in being an RPG. But I think that would particularly sting in this year, or even if it gets pushed and releases next year, because I think we've seen so many pure fantasy RPGs come out and do numbers when it comes to sales and be incredibly well respected when it comes to the critical praise. Obviously, we had Baldur's Gate 3 last year, which surpassed everyone's expectations, both critically and sales-wise. Then we had Dragon's Dogma 2 at the start of this year, a sequel to a pretty, at least initially, niche RPG that sold like gangbusters and did way better than even Capcom expected. So to me, now is the time for BioWare, who has this franchise, who hasn't done anything with it in a long time and is known, at least has been historically known for their hardcore, well, I guess not hardcore, but their full RPGs. Like, now's the time in the industry climate to drop something like this, and I just hope they don't let the opportunity pass them by, because we might not get an era like this for quite some time again.
That's kind of the thing, is that we're now in a post-Baldur's Gate 3 world, but the majority of Dragon Age 4 would have been put together before that game, landed, and reminded people how much they love top-down pen and paper style RPGs. So just here's hoping. I'd like a gaming industry with a healthy BioWare. It's been a long time since there's been one. Next game down is Mafia 4, something that's leaked a ton over the last few years. And you can go read all about that. We've done various videos on it over the last few years. But the idea is that this is an Unreal 5 game. This is the next evolution of Mafia, something like the Mafia Definitive Edition in terms of how gorgeous that game looked. It just feels like the Mafia franchise. Like obviously Mafia 3, I loved that game back when that first came out. I love the soundtrack, I love the setting, I like playing as Lincoln. Like I thought there was a lot of positives to that. My assumption is that with Mafia 4, if it is called Mafia 4, it could be called Mafia something else. It'll be a return to the feel of Mafia 1 and 2, where it has those more sim-like elements where you've got to maintain your car and like maybe drive to the speed limit and things like that. I'm curious about that. My biggest thing with it is that I just want more crime sandbox games. Like the other day, I was just remembering Sleeping Dogs, and I was remembering the entire the era where it wasn't just GTA that was associated with that genre. I totally get that over the years GTA got so big that no one else even wants to try because you'll just get obliterated. GTA Online hasn't even left the top 10 in over 10 years. I get it, but at the same time, Sleeping Dogs was awesome.
It was.
And I just want more crime sandbox genre titles. And like to a degree, I would take a Mafia game that is more in line with the fast-paced nature of 3. But at the same time, I'd like them to remind everybody what niche they initially carved out, and you know, spruce up the combat system, like have that sort of lived-in feel that something like Mafia 2 had. Whether or not they continue various character stories or whatever, I don't know. But what do you want from a Mafia?
You know what? I think Mafia is a franchise that I love, but I think it's one that has never lived up to its potential. Like you said, I love Mafia 2. I even really enjoyed Mafia 3, like yourself, more than a lot of people seem to. And it's always, with every new release, it's had something that feels a little bit innovative or feels fresh and new and distinctly Mafia in its identity, but I don't ever feel like it's been the full package.
No.
I think it's come really close with Mafia 2, so I just hope Mafia 4, whatever, you know, style it wants to prioritize, manages to blend both of those approaches. And by both of those approaches, I mean the more open-ended, gameplay-focused approach of Mafia 3 and the story-driven, more quote-unquote authentic experience that you get with Mafia 2, like you said, with driving to the speed limit and having to pay attention to the minutiae of the world. I feel like this franchise has so much potential, and you've made all of these mistakes but also got all of these wins along the way, and I just hope that this game is able to bring them all together into that full package that can, like you said, rival the greats in this genre, because I think it deserves to. And by the way, the Mafia 1 remake owned. That thing was amazing. It looked beautiful. So I hope they've learned some lessons from that as well.
Definitely, man. This is the weirdest thing to think of, but you know the Godfather game back in 2005 or whatever? There was a lot of weight to that game when you would take someone out, and like I would love the idea of a bigger, more intricate Mafia that had something close like the Nemesis system. Mafia 3 had their version of the Nemesis system, but it's like do some sort of, you know, gang warfare thing where it's a big old deal if you can actually lock down some dude and take them out, and that changes the power dynamics or whatever in the city. And like I said, make putting a hit out on someone and carrying it out a big deal. For example, I only thought of the Godfather game because of how weighty that game felt in terms of the gameplay. But at the same time, I just feel like there's a lot more you can do with a Mafia / gang warfare setting if you're going to do it authentically.
That was an idea so good you just turned me into Santa Claus, Scott Tailford. Yes, that would be amazing. In fact, I'm sure Mafia 3 even had lieutenants and districts that you were kind of freeing from various other mob families and stuff. And obviously the idea of warring mob families is it's present in a lot of mob media generally, but has played a huge part in all of these games, not just the Mafia series, but the Godfather games, like you said, I'm pretty sure is a big part of Scarface as well, the tie-in for that. So yeah, if you can deepen that with something maybe Nemesis system adjacent and make those interactions feel like more than just ticking off, you know, names on a screen and then having an area be liberated and give depth to those mechanics, I'd be in. Next up, Scott, we've got another 4-numbered title and one we've been waiting ages for, because I want to talk to you about Bioshock 4.
Oh.
This is another game, like a few on this list, that was announced in a very strange and underwhelming way, where the publisher just came out and was like, in a blog post, we're making a new Bioshock, you'll get it at some point. And we've heard so little since that it makes me wonder why they announced it at all. Maybe because there were so many leaks coming out and they wanted to get ahead of it. I don't know, but we know this new game is coming from Dambuster Studios, I want to
It's
say.
Cloud Chamber, I think, unless it's changed, yeah.
Dambuster is a completely different developer. Cloud Chamber.
Cloud Chamber.
I'm going to get this mixed up for the entire thing. I have notes, and I'm still going to mess it up.
He's played too much Final Fantasy.
The point is, I absolutely have. It's a new developer. It's not Irrational Games, and it's not even the developers of Bioshock 2, which is an underrated gem. And I feel like at this moment in time, I saw that. I clocked your little head movement there. I feel like they've just got to show something, and more than something, I even feel like they've got to show gameplay. Now feels like the time with Take-Two and 2K both saying that they are ready to release new installments in their biggest franchises. Bioshock is one that they announced would be getting a follow-up years ago. We got to see something, and for my money, I think we got to see something quite in depth as well.
I don't know. The thing is, there was a massive leak about Bioshock 4, and we've covered it a few times over the last few years. Bioshock Infinite was 2013, like 11 years ago, Jesus Christ. But at the same time, there have been various leaks for Bioshock 4. The idea that it's inspired by A Tale of Two Cities, that at least some version of it was. Who knows how many things have changed. But the idea of a city on top, a city below, going between the two, lots of commentary on classes and things like that. I like that as a general setup for a Bioshock game. It feels very Bioshock. It is interesting, though, that they've waited so long, or maybe they've had to wait so long, that now it's going to line up with Judas and Ken Levine's next title, which in itself looks like another Bioshock. Like, I was actually quite underwhelmed by the gameplay from Judas, because it just looks like you've taken this long to just do another one of these. But I guess we'll see. At the same time, though, like, the Bioshock name obviously carries a lot of weight with it. Even the something like Bioshock 2, which, Ken Levine didn't touch, like, still has its fans. I know you're a huge fan of it. I think Jules is as well.
Yes.
But still, it is that thing of, like, what's it feel like to just do a Bioshock? Like, the end of Bioshock Infinite absolutely lost me, and I'm curious how much there is that template of, like, well, we need a big crazy twist at the end. Well, we need to have all these different things to make it a Bioshock. Or, given the amount of time in between installments, do they get to just sit back and have a more measured approach and be like, look, this is the next Bioshock for a whole new generation. We don't need to worry about living up to Ken Levine anymore. Yeah. Let's just do whatever we feel is right, kind of
That's
thing.
it. Honestly, I think both scenarios work. I like the lore that was established at the end of Infinite. I know it was potentially controversial, and although you could say that nullifies any potential sequels, to me that just gives it a foundation, because as long as the stories within that framework are satisfying, I don't mind that they're following a kind of convention that has been established in a meta way, as long as we get interesting characters and cool twists and, detailed themes within those titles, I'm okay. But at the same time, like you said, it's been over 10 years since Bioshock Infinite, which is crazy. So maybe they do just make it a kind of soft reboot, replay some of the hits while remixing them and giving us something fresh, and kind of forging what Bioshock even is in the modern age. I think that would be cool. And to their credit, admittedly, they did announce it weirdly years ago, but I like that they haven't just rushed this out. They absolutely could have done a Bioshock 2 situation and gone, get us a sequel. We don't care how it's received. We just want a Bioshock thing out there, because Bioshock is a name that people know. They haven't done that. They've taken their time, and hopefully, fingers crossed, that means they're cooking up something special and not just another Bioshock.
You would hope so. I think because it's published by 2K as well, like they've got the Ken Levine game, they've got Judas, they've given him 11 years to work on whatever the hell he wants to do, and they've also retained the Bioshock IP and gone down that route as well. So it's interesting that they're both going to come out at the same time again.
It is. I know, like, nobody in the entire industry has a cushy job, right? Both of these studios, like, if I was in there in, like, 2K wasn't coming knocking for my games, I'm like, give us another 10 years, lads. Come on, no.
That's fine,
I'm busy. I got lunches to take.
I'm developing the other C. I've got one. We're getting there. Next game down is Borderlands 4. I think the last of the 4th installments that is on our particular list. But this comes from the fact that Gearbox was just bought by Take-Two, and part of all that, all those announcements, official press things, said that a new Borderlands is in active development. That phrase could be applied to we've got a logo and we know what we're going to be doing, or whatever. Obviously means day to day they're going to be developing it. Borderlands is a massive franchise. I feel like the movie is the weirdest timed thing ever. It's also one of the weirdest casts in movie history. I'm curious how that movie's going to go down. But at the same time, it feels like there will be conversation around Borderlands, obviously when the movie releases, I think later this year, as far as I know. And that would bring about the idea of why is there not a new game to be tied in with it. So unless this gets turned around extremely fast, it'll be something later on. It might be something closer to like a logo reveal or whatever. But Borderlands is so strong as an IP, it makes sense to keep it rolling over, even though people didn't exactly love Borderlands 3.
That's it. Like you said, for me, Borderlands has had real diminishing returns over the years. I played Borderlands 3 but didn't finish it because I felt like I'd played it before, and it was very pretty, and I liked some of the additions, but I kind of got my fill of that gameplay loop after about 20 hours, and I was like, okay, I have seen...
Done this a lot.
Yeah, I've done this a lot. I've seen the hand that you're playing, but a lot of people love it. It sold really well, and then they released the spin-off. Was it... What's her face's Wonderland?
Oh my God, Tiny Tina's Wonderland. I forgot that even happened. There's a rumor for Tiny Tina's Wonderland 2, so maybe that'll get shown as well. But yeah,
that was another one that came in above expectations, if I recall. I think they said that sold really well. So they have been working on stuff between main Borderlands installments. But yeah, I think it might be a logo reveal, like you said, because active development could mean anything. But I do think with the recent acquisition, I think it makes sense for them to get something out there and say, like, look, guys, our future is secure. Let's make Borderlands 4. That's our next big game.
Yeah, it's one of those franchises that everyone, I feel like it's a household name, and even if it isn't right now, it will be after the movie. But like I said, a lot of the general discourse around Borderlands is gonna hinge a bit on that movie, because I feel like the cast is so weirdly aged. I have nothing against any of those actors. I do love Jack Black as Claptrap, but I wonder if that's gonna make the conversation, is this an older franchise? Is this your dad's franchise? Is this a past generation thing? And then is that even harder to try and get the ground back for the next game?
Well, Scott, I bought this for my birthday, and I think 2008, maybe 2009. I can't remember when it came out.
We're so old, Josh.
We are so old, and yet Borderlands, for me, with its next sequel, I know that it's a formula people love, but I want to see them really push what it is. You know, I know it's probably just going to be another Borderlands, and to a lot of people, that will be totally fine.
The gun's got legs.
They're going to jump in with their friends, you know, get a bunch of loot, shoot a bunch of baddies, probably have get told off by a charismatic villain over the comms or whatever. But I used to... When Gearbox was in that sort of 2000s run, and they were making Brothers in Arms, and they were making Borderlands, you got this new IP out of nowhere. I used to love them, man. I used to have so much faith in them. And then they brought out Aliens, Colonial Marines, and they polished up Duke Nukem Forever, and then they relied so heavily on Borderlands. I kind of don't know what that studio is right now, but hopefully under these new owners, they get to make something potentially special, and potentially, like, they don't need a comeback, but maybe this could be their comeback. Next up, Scott, speaking of comebacks, we have another returning franchise, because Tomb Raider, I reckon, is going to be at this show, because recently Crystal Dynamics was acquired by Embracer Group, and it was one of the studios that Embracer Group did not buy and then immediately shut down. And it's the project that we've actually got the most information about. We've known for a while that a new Tomb Raider has been in development, and I completely forgot this, but earlier this year we got our official first look at the new Lara Croft design.
They kind of barely did anything. It's like, hey, it's out there if you want it, whatever.
I think I had to double check even as I was preparing these notes, because it looks so close to the Call of Duty skin that I didn't know if people were just like getting it mixed up, or if it was like a clickbait headline of here's Lara Croft's new design, but it's just for Call of Duty. Like, no, like this is the official design, and I like it a lot. I think it's a great mix of old and new, and I'm just really interested to see where they go with this, because I think Crystal Dynamics is capable of making really great games. But it's going to be fascinating to see how they adapt Lara Croft for the 2020s era in terms of gameplay, first and foremost. The recent rumors that were out there that we covered on a podcast or a news video a little while ago was that the game was going to go open world. And I think that makes sense. Like, don't make it a huge Just Cause style sandbox, but the environments in those most recent Tomb Raider games were pretty open anyway. So if you just kind of double down on that, keep the attention to detail, keep the density, keep the tomb design really strong, but include more surprises in there and more player agency, I think that's a cool way to differentiate itself, not only from the previous Tomb Raider games, but the competition like Uncharted or whatever it may be.
Totally, man. Well, we said we did a big deep dive video on the full set of leaks that came out a few weeks ago, and I like the idea of, like you said, that open world structure where you're going up against different factions of gangs or whatever. They mentioned like non-lethal takedowns and ways to sort of infiltrate different areas, and I think that's a cool way of doing the whole maximize the 3D space idea of Tomb Raider. Like I said that on the other video that we did, but I don't feel like hardly anyone codes a video game where you dominate a 3D space. It's hardly ever that you're conquering verticality, like where you're actually at the edge of some precipice looking down, thinking, oh my God, I've conquered this whole thing. And comparisons that came to mind, or examples that came to mind, are things like Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom, Jusant, which is a really cool climbing indie game. Just that idea of, like I said, conquering a space. I think Tomb Raider should own that, especially when it comes to a full open world. You should be able to do the old school Todd Howard thing of see that mountain, you can go there, but it should actually have good gameplay doing so. Death Stranding is like a half measure where you can climb anything with ropes and ladders and stuff, but you can't grapple with the geometry itself, which in itself was something that Assassin's Creed kind of brought to the table back in 2007, the idea that everything was a handhold. I just feel like all of that can make for a really cool, unique, signature, iconic Tomb Raider game, and I hope they double down on it. Next one down is Project 007. This is something that you wrote down, but it comes from Hitman developer IO Interactive. We know that they're working on a James Bond game. That was 4 years ago.
Which blew my mind,
ridiculous. Been 4 years ago, but I kind of noted down that obviously conversations keep heating up around the idea of who the next James Bond is. And I will say, for me personally, Bond is not my franchise. I barely care. But at the same time, I feel like overall, obviously, it's a massive deal. No Time to Die came out 3 years ago, so I feel like it's been a while. Things are going to start coming back around as to who the next Bond is, doing the next Bond game. And I will say, as much as I don't really care about the movies, the Bond video games have always been stellar. Something like Everything or Nothing, or Agent Under Fire, Nightfire. You can go all the way back to GoldenEye if you want, but I love that era across the 2000s, and I feel like we haven't had anything even close to how incredible that run was. And that was EA back then. EA used to use their money for good back in the day, and it was brilliant. Sometimes, not for a while, but they did back then. And I just like that idea of giving the James Bond IP to the Hitman developers, like showing off what that is. Does it just feel like Hitman with the James Bond skin? Like there are a lot of Hitman levels and assassinations that kind of feel like Bond levels anyway. So I'm curious how they distinguish that and just how it feels, how it looks in terms of how it plays.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not the first person to say this, but I think everyone realized that the Dubai level in the most recent Hitman was pretty much a test run for a James Bond game. It looked like a James Bond game. It sounded like a James Bond game. I think that got a lot of people...
No, sorry.
Yeah, go on.
You even exfiltrate by diving off that thing with like a parachute at the end anyway.
Yeah, it's a James Bond level in a Hitman game, right? So if that is the blueprint, I'm kind of in for it. I'm similar to you where James Bond, at least in the movie space, it's not my franchise either. I've seen a handful, enjoyed them enough, but never really connected to that world. However, also like you, the games I absolutely adored. Everything or Nothing, like you said, Nightfire back in the day. I know people prefer GoldenEye, but I'm a younger kid. Nightfire was mine on PS2.
Nightfire was our GoldenEye.
That was our GoldenEye. From Russia with Love, I absolutely adored. I've not even seen that movie, but the game is great.
Everything or Nothing is my absolute number one.
I think that's number one. From Russia with Love, second perhaps. But the point is, great games. So a lot to live up to, I think, because some of the best licensed games we've ever had are James Bond games, and it's been 4 years since they announced this, and I hadn't even thought about the idea of them incorporating the new James Bond until you just mentioned it there. I think the most recent rumors are that Aaron Taylor Johnson is going to be the new Bond. Obviously that can change on a dime, but that would be fascinating if they've taken this long, not only because they're getting it ready, but because they're waiting for an announcement from MGM to drop or confirm the next Bond movie and maybe the next Bond, and then you have this game ready to go, either preceding it or alongside it, to work as this kind of double-hander of new movie, new game, and also it's from a developer you love.
Yeah, because until I didn't fully think this through, but you do have the Daniel Craig games. Like they remade GoldenEye with him. You had the Quantum of Solace game. I actually really like Bloodstone. I know people weren't bothered about Bloodstone. Yeah. That was like, I love those kind of over-shoulder third-person cover shooters with a couple of melee takedowns. Like that's a lovely little formula. Like we don't get enough of them, to be honest. I absolutely love that stuff. But yeah, there's a way to tie everything together to remind people who the new Bond is. They certainly have the money for it. Internally, this is more of a movie conversation, but Eon, or whatever the hell that stands for, the guys that own Bond, are apparently notoriously horrible to deal with in terms of how locked down the James Bond IP is, which likely explains why it takes so long for these things to come together. But when they do, they tend to roll things out across multiple mediums at the same time. So maybe it's about time for another James Bond blowout later in the year across movies and games.
Absolutely. Scott, I've got one that I've thrown on here just for my own pleasure. I don't know what you think about it. We have actually never talked about this, I don't think, on podcast or privately or on video, and that's the Blumhouse horror game.
My memory's so bad. that I just assumed we must have talked about this before.
I don't think we did.
I have no idea.
It was announced when I was off last year, if I recall, that Blumhouse, if you don't know, a huge horror movie studio, has made the likes of The Conjuring, Insidious, Megan recently, a huge name in the horror world. They announced that they were going to start getting into games at the end of last year, and they have been confirmed as an official partner for Summer Games Fest. So you have to assume whatever their first game is going to be unveiled in a matter of weeks. I think what's interesting though is that Blumhouse are associated with so many now iconic franchises in the horror realm, but they've confirmed that none of these games are going to be relying on links to those franchises. They're going to be original experiences, all around about the $10 million mark, so quite low budget. But to me, that's exciting because I love horror games, and to get a backing of a big studio like this, I just think that could be really cool if they manage to court the right creators and pull this off, because I just want more horror publishers and developers in my life, Scott.
Well, the thing is, the Blumhouse's whole thing, as far as I know, is that they set the budget regardless of anything. So you can do whatever you want with this budget. And I love that approach, especially in gaming when budgets are so ludicrously out of control for something like a Suicide Squad or whatever. And then that means that they then have to do a ludicrous amount of sales to try and make it all make sense. Just get on top of the budget stuff. And I totally get it that as development rolls out, you can't account for everything. Yeah. But I do like the idea of applying that model that has worked so well in the movie space to gaming and trying to make those things work, and hopefully producing a wider variety of gameplay mechanics or different stories and things like that, and put it all under the Blumhouse banner. That at least turns heads and gives you at least some of those sales to see what the hell they're actually going to come up with.
Yeah, hopefully they approach this kind of like how Annapurna Interactive have recently, another studio predominantly known as a movie studio, getting into games and releasing really interesting, quirky in many cases, horror games or psychological thriller games. I just think that backing of Blumhouse, like you said, turns heads, and if they're able to fund these projects, I think that's just really good for the horror space, because I think some of the most recent horror games that we've gotten have been absolutely fantastic. They've all been a little bit similar, admittedly, but some of my favorite experiences from the past few years have been Visage or Madison from last year, games that scared the crap out of me, and hopefully Blumhouse can follow in their footsteps, or maybe even better, give funding to those independent studios who are kind of getting a lot of risk and trying to recoup costs, and just give them that bit of security at a time when the industry seems to have no security at all. That's the dream. Hopefully it'll come true. Probably won't, because this is gaming, but let's see.
I feel like the horror genre is one of the healthiest genres at the minute. Shout out to Crow Country.
Yeah, of course, Crow Country. Damn.
Yeah, Max Payne, Josh.
Oh my God, Scott Tilford. Are there any better words in the English language than those two?
Maximum Pain. And we have official confirmation from Remedy that both the Max Payne 1 and 2 remakes are in production. Sadly, voice of Max Payne, James McCaffrey, did pass away earlier in 2024. So that does throw into question, I guess, how much they were potentially going to be relying on him for new voice work, or maybe that was already recorded beforehand. Either way, we know that some of Remedy's newest projects are going to be these full-on Max Payne remakes, assumedly using the Northlight engine, which is what Alan Wake 2 uses, and that game looks absolutely stunning. It's one of the best looking games of the generation so far. Absolutely gorgeous. Reapplying that to Max Payne and doubling down on the gameplay side of things and doing the best looking bullet time ever, super physicsy, all that kind of stuff. I really look forward to it. Me and you champion Max Payne 3 all the time.
Yeah.
And that game never really got its due, mainly because of how much they changed the aesthetic of Max, but if you play that game, you totally get why that happens. I just like the idea of doubling down on the physics stuff. Max Payne 2 had the Havoc physics. Max Payne 3 was Rockstar's Rage engine back then, and I like the idea of having really good meaty gunfights where it feels like every bullet is ripping through everything in the environment. Put that all in super slow-mo, make it look gorgeous. Like, it should be an easy win.
Absolutely. I mean, I like the whole franchise, but honestly, perhaps controversially, I'm a Max Payne 3 guy.
It's a good game.
The other two, not to say those are bad, but I love that game. And gameplay-wise, I do kind of hope that's the template, because I still think the weighty gunplay in the title is phenomenal. But Remedy doesn't have to listen to me, because they can do whatever the hell they want, and I will trust them wholeheartedly, because at the end of the day, I personally think Remedy is on the run of their lives right now. I don't think that studio has been better between Control and Alan Wake 2. I think they are just, don't want to say punching above their weight because it sounds, a bit derogatory, but I feel like they've really hit into another echelon. Like you said, Alan Wake 2, one of the most beautiful games ever produced. Not only that, it's one of the most unique games ever produced in terms of its ambition when it comes to blending live action cutscenes with, in-engine gameplay in a way I've never seen accomplished that well. No. Obviously, Remedy has dipped their toes into this before. They had Quantum Break back in the day when Xbox was trying to court the TV crowd, and we had live action stuff in Control. But this was that to me was the real deal. That was the new bar for live action stuff if we're going to put that in a game. So I'm really interested to see what they do with this remake, having accrued all of that knowledge, all of that technology, and if I think the last I heard was that they're putting them both into one package as well. So you've theoretically got this one continuous story. How does that change things? What are you going to update? And yeah, like you said right at the very start, how will we deal with the fact that the original iconic and excellent voice actor is no longer around to provide those voice lines? Do you recast? Do you repurpose the already, still great voice lines from Max Payne 1, 2, or even 3, who knows? And more importantly as well, does this mean that we're going to get more Max Payne in the future? Does Remedy come back and do Max Payne 4 and continue that story? Who knows?
The thing is, I'm not going to do full spoilers for Alan Wake 2, but there are allusions to Max Payne existing in the now Remedy-verse. A lot of this stuff seems to be Remedy want to be able to connect all their games together. They already have various tangents between Control and Alan Wake. And like I said, Max Payne is mentioned. There's a whole thing in Alan Wake to do with the character Alex Casey, which seemed to be born out of the fact that Max Payne is owned by Rockstar. And then whatever the hell happened behind the scenes has allowed for this Max Payne 1 and 2 remake. But then it's how much do Rockstar give Remedy or allow them to use bits of the tech that made Max Payne 3 come to life, because that game plays so differently to 1 and 2. I just wonder how it all comes together, and I wonder if they have been able to square off some new version of the fiction that unites the whole thing, brings it all together, makes everything fit under the other Remedy umbrella. And if it has the level of weird that something like Alan Wake 2 has, because Remedy have only gone increasingly in the Lynchian direction since they've got more independence, and they've done some contract work, like they did that first-person Crossfire first-person shooter campaign, which literally felt like it was just keeping the lights on. And then they've been able to, that then allowed them to make things like Alan Wake 2, which sadly, as of time of recording, still hasn't recouped its sales yet, its budget yet, but still you would hope that over time it does. I just hope that they're able to channel that into these games, the games that put them on the map in the first place. And like you said, all the lessons they've learned over the years, inject us a little bit more of that Alan Wakey, weird Lynchian stuff into Max Payne. It was there anyway, but you can really double down on it and flesh out the TV shows and the radio broadcasts and all the weird quirky stuff that was in there in the first place.
And just sell, please. Please make money. God, Remedy is the only studio doing it like they do, and I think they deserve way more recognition from a financial standpoint, but hopefully stuff like this, these bigger, more well-known franchise hits and the contract work allows them, like you said, to keep the lights on and keep being as weird as they are. Scott, talking about weird freaks, I want to talk to you about Sonic Frontiers 2. What a segue.
That's me being the weird freak, also Sonic as well. But yeah, more Sonic, my friend.
Right, I'm taking charge on this one because I have a lot of questions. And because Sonic Frontiers 1 seemed like such a huge return to form and was the closest I have ever come to buying a Sonic game on day one. Because its strange, surreal, and ethereal mix of Sonic mayhem and eerie quiet in this open world was so much of my jam I couldn't explain it to you. You used to play the soundtrack so much in the office, which absolutely ruled as well. But it seems like Sonic Frontiers 2 is happening thanks to known leaker Daniel RPK, who said that it was in development very recently. And it makes sense considering how well received Frontiers was and how much of a financial success it was. So I want to throw it over to you. Are you looking forward to this? Do you think there's, because I know a lot of people complain about the bugs and stuff of Frontiers at launch, but do you think this is the right move, or should they have done something entirely different with the Sonic franchise?
No, they are definitely onto something with this, where Frontiers, being an open world Sonic game, kind of felt like it was definitely just them ripping off Breath of the Wild. That's That's all Sonic ever does, is just look at whatever's weird. Is it Mario? I'll be Sonic. Is it God of War and third-person hack and slash? We'll do Sonic Unleashed. Like, whatever's working, they'll do their version of it. Breath of the Wild and New Age Zelda was the whole massive open world Zelda, so they did their version of it. However, the cool thing was that it kind of felt like Breath of the Wild meets Tony Hawk's. Like, when Sonic Frontiers was on point and you were going rail to rail, doing different tricks between parts of the environment, chaining it all together with a gorgeous soundtrack or whatever, that was a Tony Hawk's vibe. And I feel like if you're gonna do more cool Sonic things, you double down on the tricks and the style and the fun side of it. There is that disparate side, like you said, where it was like Sonic's all alone and he's lost his friends and he's on his island and he's thinking about his own life, and then you meet up with everybody one by one, and Knuckles is wondering whether he should have devoted his whole life to defending the Chaos Emerald. I love all that stuff. Sonic as an IP, as a wider franchise, is having a moment at the minute because they're going through all the movies rolling out, and Shadow is about to be in Sonic 3. He's also going to be in the re-release of Sonic Generations. So there's a lot going on with Sonic, and I think it's interesting.
Oh, you just rocked me with the idea that can we play as Shadow in this new one?
They will do. Yeah, they absolutely will do.
Oh, I'm so in.
You're not going to be that far off the idea of just targeting an enemy and shooting him style in like Shadow the Hedgehog. It's not be that long before they just remake Shadow the Hedgehog.
I hope so. Shadow the Hedgehog, the best Sonic game, the only one I've played all the way through.
There'll be a wing of people agreeing with you every single time. But yeah, like I said, Sonic overall feels like it's on the form of its life, or a form it hasn't seen since the early 90s. And that's interesting to see. Like Sonic as an IP, obviously a lot of ups and downs, but there's always been a charm there. The music side has always carried through. I'm just curious what they managed to double down on. There's a lot of interesting stuff in regards to how much money Sega allocate to Sonic, because Sonic isn't actually that big a deal in the East. He's way a bigger deal in the West. And I remember there was an interview, I forget the name of the creative director of Sonic Frontiers, who said because Frontiers did so well, Sega are giving them more money for the next one. So you would assume that the likes of the level of polish, the bugs, that kind of stuff actually gets ironed out, because they do have something here, and Frontiers moves so well, and when it's on, it's awesome, and I feel like you can nail that. The DLC for Frontiers was weird, because Frontiers' own camera system and the way that game engine works couldn't really keep up with the way that they were trying to design the levels. Like, it was too easy to just get thrown back into the sea and restart the whole thing. But again, I think they have something here, and because Tony Hawk's isn't a regular staple of our diets at the minute, it might as well be Sonic. Like, what? Grinding on rails with your shoes is a cool way to grind.
I wish Tony Hawk was part of my diet more, Scott. Like you said, I think, Sonic really is having a moment, not just in the gaming space, but the two movies have been hugely successful. We've got the Knuckles TV show,
which no one's watching, but it's okay.
People might enjoy it. Like I said, we got Shadow coming in the new movie as well. I feel like Sonic is as big as he has ever been in terms of that widespread recognition, and hopefully that translates to more money for the games and better games that support this ongoing little blue freak moment that we're currently in.
The thing is, it is ludicrous how much staying power Sonic has had. And I say that as a huge Sonic fan, like mainly when I was like 5 years old, but I can still tap back into that and be like, running fast as a little blue spiky dude is fun. And I'm a big fan of the music and some of the games. But it is weird considering that most of the games are either like middling to terrible. Like, and I'm a Sonic fan. Again, I'm a big fan. Sonic Generations, huge fan. Frontiers, loved it. Adventure, whatever. But at the same time, there are a lot of bad installments here. And the Sonic fandom knows this. There's always things where the game releases and everybody has to go, oh yeah, well, I don't like this and this, but I do like this and this. We've never had a straight 10 out of 10 Sonic game since like Sonic 2. Like, I mean, I would probably say Generations is way up there, but it's still not a 10 out of 10 banger. Whereas like, I mean, some people in padded cells would say Shadow the Hedgehog, but I still feel like there's a lot of ground there. Like, no one's nailing the hyper-fast style that Sonic could bring to the table. Frontier's got the closest.
No, you're right. I mean, I feel like Sonic is one of those franchises that just will never die. It gains so much goodwill, has such strong iconography, and just such instant appeal. Like, I'm not a Sonic guy, but do I want to be a little blue guy with trainers who goes fast? Yes, I want to do that all the time. I want to be him. I want to be friends with him. I want him to be my partner.
He eats the chili dogs all the time as well.
Absolutely.
So good.
I feel like we've got some of those gaming franchises to bring it back to games. Generally now, like Silent Hill, for instance, which we may talk about next, another franchise that hasn't had a good installment in a decade, if not longer, and yet if people can hang onto the promise of finally getting a return to form, they absolutely will. And I see Sonic fans as being very similar to that. Like, they will take what they can get and like find the good in it. And I think that's kind of cool. They deserve more, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
And hopefully Frontiers 2 will be that, but that is a dedicated, hardcore fandom. And it also reminds me of Ghostbusters. Shout out to Cy White. Another franchise which arguably hasn't had many good movies, but is getting along on that.
She's going to kick that door down if you keep going on.
She will. I'm just saying. I said not many good movies. Didn't say I didn't have none. Don't worry, Cy. I'm on your side.
I'm only joshing. Hey, final game that we have down is Silent Hill Townfall.
Who could have seen that coming?
Who could have seen that coming? This comes from the fact that Annapurna Interactive have said that they are going to be at the Summer Game Fest event, and we have Silent Hill 2 coming later this year as well. Like, mentioning franchises that are having a moment. Konami would really like Silent Hill to have a moment. I feel like they're doing, maybe not their best, but they're doing what they can. There was that big live stream where they announced a whole bunch of different projects which sounded very promising, including Townfall, Silent Hill F, whatever. And then they put out Silent Hill Ascension, which is one of the worst received games of all time. Is one of the most weird. It's a live stream with microtransactions. You can buy a sticker that says it's trauma to put in the live chat. Konami, what the living hell are you doing? But at the same time, someone over there believes in Silent Hill, and they're not getting the message out very well. But they're trying. There was also the short message, which you played, and
very short.
It was very short, and was very much a mixed bag as well. But still, Townfall is the next, at least budgeted main installment type thing, which I think is more like a Telltale game. It's meant to be more like a potentially episodic but very dialogue heavy, very decision heavy game.
Yeah, it's got a very cool concept, I think. So the idea is that there are going to be a bunch of different installments in this sub-series, and each one is going to be developed by a different studio, bringing their own, variations and ideas to the fore. I think that's really cool. You know, take a sort of Twilight Zone approach with Silent Hill. Sounds awesome. And the developers they've got behind this one also made Observer a few years ago, a space set horror puzzle game, which
phenomenal
absolutely
game.
Ruled. So I am chomping at the bit to get more information from this. And that's just kind of because, on the one hand, I am really excited for it, but on the other hand, like you said, it feels like it's been a while since we've had any updates on projects that aren't just the Silent Hill 2 remaster. Yeah, we got the short message, which is probably linked to Silent Hill F, probably.
Maybe.
But even that, like you said, was, I liked it, but it wasn't the confidence injection and we are so back moment that something like PT was back in the day, even though they were obviously trying to evoke that. So hopefully, whether we get this before or whether we get this after Silent Hill 2, this is our first taste at this Summer Games Fest of what future Silent Hill looks like from a gameplay and story perspective that isn't just like a little bit of a tease.
I should quickly say, because I had to Google this to make sure, Observation is the sci-fi game set in space. Phenomenal Observer is the cyberpunk one with Rutger Hauer.
Ironically,
both awesome.
Another studio that's making a Silent Hill game.
Yes, Bloober Team. But yeah, Observation is the one. I can get way more behind Observation. That thing rules. But yeah, in regards to Silent Hill, it is weird thinking about it. Where is it just a brand name at this point? I remember seeing, and I don't know the name of the artist who did it, but the guy that created Pyramid Head literally tweeted saying, "I wish I never invented Pyramid Head," because it's just included in everything, whether it be Dead by Daylight or just you need to invoke Silent Hill. So hey, by the way, there's a guy with a pyramid on his head, and it just gets a bit rote. I mean, that was the biggest problem with the live chat stuff in Silent Hill Ascension was just, like I said, an It's Trauma sticker, and the way that Silent Hill 2, the remake, has been marketed, where it's like, look how dour this is, look how much James Sunderland's affected by all this stuff. I think there's a way for it to become very marketing focused or very PR focused and very nostalgia focused, and that's just a problem if you're trying to re-inject it with a sense of longevity, because if it only feels like it's tapping back into the thing that you knew before, it's not really going to have any scope for the future.
No, I agree. There is always the worry that Silent Hill just becomes iconography. Like you said, we've seen that with Pyramid Head, who was once very specific to Silent Hill 2, just showing up all over the gaff because people...
He's a busy man.
People know Pyramid Head. He's got lots of jobs, apparently. People know the demonic nurses from the same game, so we'll throw those and everything. We'll make this collection of recognizable images that we can continue to resell. Honestly, that's kind of my problem with Fallout at the moment, that it's more iconography than it is a story. It's just like, here's the Vault Boy, here are the Brothers of Steel. Are we going to do anything interesting with them? We're going to tread the same ground and spin our wheels because Bethesda doesn't want to.
Yeah, we don't know what to do.
That's another video.
We acquired the IP. We don't.
We acquired it. We don't want to develop the IP. We just want to, get that Vault Boy and things. The point is, get away from Fallout. Don't care. Silent Hill. Yes, I do think though it's promising that, of course, they're relying on nostalgia for the Silent Hill 2 remake, but I think both F and Townfall, they look new enough. It doesn't feel like, from the limited snippets of them so far, that they are just relying on, hey, you remember this? Or here are themes we've gone over before.
True.
And hopefully with this project in particular, having a bunch of different developers on board, if they don't inspire diversity and variety in the kind of stories they're trying to tell, then what's the point in even hiring all those developers if you just want some jobber to come in and make you a Silent Hill?
Well, that's the thing, right? And yeah, we'll find out how Silent Hill feels a year from now, because we'll have the Silent Hill 2 remake, which in itself has had various scenes changed in the newer trailers when they've gone back to the gameplay footage. The response to the initial reveal for Silent Hill 2's remake was extremely negative. So apparently Bloober has gone back and changed the composition of some of those scenes, tried not to lean so much on James Sunderland's ridiculous face, as it was in that reveal trailer. But we'll see. Overall, Summer Game Fest, like I said at the beginning, coming June 7th, so we haven't got that much longer to wait to see which of these things are true, and hopefully they all will be. Let us know your favorites down in the comments below. For now, I've been Scott Tailfoot from WhatCulture.com.
I've been Josh from WhatCulture.com.
Hell yeah, he has. Take care, and we'll catch you soon.
Not done an outro in a while.
I know!